K2 YouTube. TK. All right, guys. Well, first things first. I just wanted to say congratulations on making it to the end of the semester, guys. It was a long semester. We had some ups and downs. Obviously, we had some weird kind of mix up with weeks just because of classes being canceled, and then just some weather. It was kind of just a little out of the ordinary, but we made it. We're here at the end of lab, guys. So congrats on making it to the end. And I know whatever you guys do after this is gonna be very bright. I know a lot of you guys are exercise science majors, nursing students, and I can't wait to hear and potentially see what you guys go off and do after this class. So it was a really fun time. But before we kind of wrap things up, we do have to do one more content-filled lab, and this one is going to be on the reproductive system. Okay, so knowing that there are differences between males and females, the male and female sex, there are basically two different kinds of reproductive systems that we're going to be discussing. And the way that I'm going to try and break up these videos is this video is going to focus more on the male side of things. It might be a little bit long because it's going to kind of intertwine with the pre-lab prep and everything. And then the second video is going to be focused all on the female. And then we'll have a third video just briefly discussing the female menstrual sexual cycle. Okay. So what are we going to do first? So looking at our learning objectives here, guys, the first four here are all for the males. Okay. And then if we go down here, the last four are all for the females. Okay. And spoiler alert, a lot of the answers to a lot of these are going to be coming out of the pre-lab prep here. So it makes it a lot more straightforward if you're looking for something to really hone in on. Excuse me. Your pre-lab prep here is going to be a good key piece of that. All right. So without further ado, let's get right into it, talking about the pre-lab prep here. So the first four terms here we're going to be defining are for the male sex, specifically spermatogenesis. And genesis, as I've kind of alluded to in the past, and we've kind of chatted about, genesis means the creation of. Okay. And then, as it says in the name, it is the creation of sperm, or the production of sperm. Okay. And then we have erection here. Okay, so this is relating to the male genitalia, to the penis. So this is having an increase, all right, in blood flow to the penis, causing it to become rigid and stiffened. And this is primarily for the anticipation of undergoing sexual intercourse of some sort. Okay. And then we have emission here. So emission and expulsion are kind of intertwined with one another. Okay. So emission, all right, is the movement of sperm from the ductus deferens into the urethra. Okay. All right, and then our last one here is expulsion itself. Okay, so this is when semen is expelled from the body. All right, during an orgasm, a male orgasm. Okay. All right, and then our last four terms relating to the females. Okay, so we have another genesis term. So this is oogenesis. Okay. So when you have the letter O like this, it's relating to the egg itself. Okay, so the creation of egg, or of an egg. And as we know, or probably have heard about in the past, so the sperm has to fertilize the egg to be able to create life, to create a baby. Okay, so this is with the male, or this is with the female primary sex characteristic. Sex characteristic is to do is to create an egg. Okay. We have ovulation after that. So this is the release of an egg from the follicle, which the follicles are things made in the ovaries, and we'll talk about those when we get there. Okay. We also have lactation here. So this is the synthesis and ejection of milk from the mammary glands. All right. The breast tissue in particular. And our last one is fertilization. Okay. So when the sperm meets and combines with the egg. Okay. So that's the four terms here, or 8 terms. Okay, so 4 for each. All right, and that relates up to our learning objectives here. And if we scroll down here, we got to do a couple more things. So describe the functions of the following parts of the scrotum. Okay. So the scrotum is the little skin-folded sac, okay, that hangs outside of the body, and this is where the testicles are stored, okay, the primary male sex organs. So we have a couple muscles that help keep these guys at bay in terms of keeping them nice and healthy and at the optimal temperature to be able to reproduce, all right? So the first muscle here is called the cremaster muscle, okay? So what this does is when it contracts, it pulls the testicles closer to the core of the body. Now you don't fully go up into the body or anything, right? That's not really a possibility for these things, but it allows them to get closer to the core temperature of the body from the external environment to warm them up. Okay, so they do that when they're cold, and they relax when they are too warm. Okay. The reason they do that is because if they are too warm, you want to try and cool off the testicles, okay? So then they relax. That way they hang a little bit further away from the core temperature to allow for a better cooling. So the optimal temperature, guys, of these guys to function at is about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? So it's a little bit colder than our normal body temperature, which is 98.6. So you got to be just a little bit colder in order to function properly, okay? All right, then we have the dartos muscle, okay? Which, by the way, as I'm kind of listing these off, let's just go over here and chat about these for a quick second. I can try and show them to you guys. So, for some reason, the cremaster muscle isn't on. I went through this earlier. For some reason, it's not on our model here, but you can at least see where the dartos muscle will kind of reside. So, as we'll see in the pictures later, the cremaster muscle, it kind of looks like this... I'm trying to think, this kind of like big fiber like tissue that extends and it kind of wraps itself with a vas deferens. Well, you can't for some reason see it here. I already tried to search it up. We can at least see the dartos muscle, okay? And what does this guy do? So it functions very similar to the cremaster. It decreases the surface area of the scrotum to decrease heat loss. Okay. So for example, let's say it's like really cold outside or something, correct? What the dartos muscle will do is it's going to kind of shrivel up and decrease the surface area, so that way we're not having as much heat exchange between the external environment and the testicles, okay? So they shrivel up to try and keep the testicles nice and warm as much as possible. And then same thing goes if it is too hot outside, okay? They're going to relax. That way we allow for as much heat exchange as possible, a max heat exchange between the testicles and the external environment, okay? And then we also have the pampiniform plexus, and this one isn't very well defined on our models here, but you can just barely make out those extra little vessels that go down and wrap themselves around the testicles here, okay? So what these do, okay, is a network of veins, all right, that cools the arterial blood flowing into testicles to about 35 to about 95. I'm going in the Celsius, about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll get all my stuff fixed up there. Perfect. So, yeah. Same thing here to keep those guys at the nice optimal temperature of 95 degrees. Remember, the core temperature is about 98.6. So if we're pumping the blood from the core, the blood that goes into the testicles is at about 98.6. So what the veins do is they cool those down because of how close they run to the testicles. So they cool them down so that way those testicles can be at the optimal 95 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? All right, which cells of the testes produce testosterone? So you can't see these on here, unfortunately, okay? But the cells that do that is going to be the interstitial endocrine cells. All right. So we have that one there. And then which cells protect the developing sperm and promote their development? Those are going to be the nurse cells. And I think that one's easy enough in the name, right? What do nurses usually do? They take care of patients. They take care of people. Very similar here. The nurse cells of the testicles take care of the sperm and help promote their development. Okay. So I think that one helps a lot. Okay, so match the following functions with the appropriate structure of the male reproductive system. All right, so which one is involved in longer sperm maturation? All right, this is going to be the epididymis. All right, so this guy right here, perfect. longer term sperm storage. All right. So this is actually, a lot of people get this mistaken with epididymis, but it is not. It's actually the ductus deferens, the vas deferens. Okay. Sperm can store itself in there to up to 60 days, believe it or not. This secretes a clear, slippery fluid that neutralizes any urine. All right, this is going to be letter A, the bulbourethral glands, because I think the last thing that your sperm would want would be any urine going inside of the vagina. It makes it a little more acidic environment for them to swim into. So anything that can neutralize that helps them a ton, because they have to go on a quite a journey to go and find the egg when they're trying to fertilize. Contributing to a clotting enzyme and a protease to semen. This is going to be the prostate gland, guys. All right, letter D here. All right, location of sperm production. This is the seminiferous tubules, okay? We'll talk about those guys in a little bit. And then last but not least here, contracts last in the male sexual response, contributes 65% of the volume of semen, okay? So the majority of the semen is contributed by the seminal vesicles, all right? Perfect. So we have those ones down here. And now let's talk about the parts of the sperm, okay? So this one has the enzymes for fertilization itself, okay? So the ones that are responsible for this is the acrosome, which is basically just the tip of the sperm, okay? So the sperm kind of has an oval-shaped head, and then it has the mid-piece, and then it has a tail. The actual tip itself of the head is called the acrosome, and this has the enzymes for fertilization. Propels the sperm. This is going to be the tail. It kind of has a wiggling motion to it, so it helps propel them forward. Has a lot of mitochondria to provide energy. This is going to be the mid-piece. This is where all the energy comes from, and energy creation comes from, the function. And then contains the DNA, last but not least, letter B here. All right, perfect. All right, in our last pre-lab prep, so in the ovary, each egg, oocyte, is surrounded by its own follicle. The follicle consists of layers of cells that grow and develop during each female sexual cycle. The follicles support the egg both before and after ovulation. So two types of cells here. Which one of the cell layers of the ovarian follicle produces androgens such as testosterone? All right, this is going to be the theca. Okay, this is the most outer layer, right? So they produce the androgens. So what happens from there? So androgens are then converted into estrogen, and this is primarily done from the granulosa cells. Okay, it's the most inner layer of the follicle, and we'll show you guys what that looks like in a little bit. Okay. But besides that, pre-lab prep done, and that got out a lot of our learning objectives, guys. So make sure we have these guys down. You should be good to go for a good majority of these guys up here, okay? So let's talk about the male reproductive anatomy, okay? So really, really important structures, okay? And I think what we're going to kind of see here, okay, is that there are a lot of structures between the male and the female reproductive systems that are homologous, meaning that they have a similar-ish anatomy. The only difference is primarily what their function and what they do, okay? So we're going to try and chat about those when we get there for some examples. But primarily what we're going to do is just show you guys these images here, and then I'll try and show them to you guys here, of course, on our Human Anatomy Atlas app, okay? So let's scroll down here. So giving us a good view, just looking at it right away. So you're looking at the scrotum and the spermatic cord, actually looking at the anterior aspect of the male reproductive system. So what they're showing you is the penis, okay? And then they also have down here the scrotum, which is like that skin fold sac I told you that holds the testicles, all right? You have one on the left side, one on the right side, okay? And then you have the epididymis up above, which epi, meaning above, and then didymis means testicles. So why is it called that? Because it resides above the testicles, okay? And you have the ductus deferens, which is the path that the sperm will travel until it eventually will enter into the normal urethra, and then it is expelled out during an orgasm, okay? Pampinophore plexus here. And then on this side, you have the cremaster muscle, which isn't visualized on the Human Anatomy Atlas app, and then the dartos muscle, okay? And you can see most of all the structures over here. This is just a kind of a generalized view. So you have the penis, of course. We'll get rid of this dartos fascia here. So you have the penis, and then we'll talk about the different parts of it. You have the testicles here, or the spermatic fascia. You can see that there's the testicle on the right side. You can see the epididymis here. You can see that ductus or vas deferens as it goes up, and it'll wrap around, and we'll talk about those more internal structures in a little bit. Okay. So scrolling down here, so looking in particular at the testes, okay, and the associated structure. So let's get out of this view. Let's go over to this one here, okay? So on this one, what it's showing you is the seminiferous tubules, okay? And this is the kind of the functional unit, basically, of the testicles. So this is what's actually producing the sperm. It's using that testosterone to produce that sperm. And it kind of has this kind of worm-looking like appearance to it, as you can kind of see here, okay? Not very well defined over here on the Anatomy Atlas app, just because it's a little blurred out here. But you can see how kind of worm structure like it looks eventually until it becomes the ductus deferens. And you can see that here as well. All right, you can see all those little worm structures here, and then eventually we'll exit out and become the ductus deferens, okay? So that's pretty much all to show you on that model there. All right, so we have a sagittal section here. So I don't think there's a good, I was looking through this earlier, I didn't see a great one here for a sagittal section. Actually, no, this is a pretty solid one right here. Perfect, okay. So yeah, looking on the side here, what do we got? So starting, we have the scrotum, of course, and then we have the testicles, and you have this thing called the prepuce, okay, which is a little like, kind of folding over of the skin at the top of the penis here, okay. It's not actually defined over here on our Anatomy Atlas model, but it does have the glands, okay, which is basically the head of the penis. It's the most sensitive part of it, okay. You have the epididymis, which is right over here. And then you have a couple different muscles here, okay. One is called the corpus cavernosum, and one is called the corpus sponginosum. We'll talk about those more in depth on a couple extra pages, but just know you have two different muscles there. All right, you have the ductus deferens, which we can see that as it comes all the way up and it wraps itself around back over on this side. And what's going to happen here, oops, let's see if I can get rid of that real quick. Where's my eraser? Perfect. So what you're gonna see what happens here. So this vas deferens, it's gonna come all the way up and it wraps itself around. It does not go inside of the bladder here, okay? So that's a common misconception that it goes through the bladder. It actually does not. It either goes right above it, or it goes kind of this picture's a little obscure because it makes it look like it goes through, but it actually wraps around the other side, kind of like wraps like a ring around it, okay? So it wraps around and eventually will meet up with the seminal vesicle, which is on the back side here, okay? And the seminal vesicle, remember, contributes about 65% of the volume to the semen. And eventually, vas deferens will become what is known as the ejaculatory duct, right here, okay? And that passes directly through the prostate gland, okay? So remember, the prostate gland, what this guy has, remember, it has that protease for the semen, okay? And it also has that clotting enzyme to it. And then it enters into the normal urethral tract as the sperm is exited through the urethra, through the tip of the penis. Okay, and you can see that urethra as it goes right through that spongus, that corpus spongiosum right there. All right, so good, great view there. And then very similar, this is a sagittal section. This is what a posterior view would look like, showing you all the structures, okay? And the one I didn't talk about, oh yeah, the bulbourethral glands, okay? So very, very small ones over here. I can zoom in just to show you those. So very, very small glands here, okay? Remember, these guys, what they're responsible for, secreting a clear, slippery fluid that's going to neutralize that urine, okay? So very, very small structures. You can just barely see those guys on our models here. Very, very small, all right? Perfect. So we'll scroll down here. So those muscles I talked to you guys about, okay? So you have two muscles, okay? One is called the corpus cavernosum, and then one is called the corpus spongiosum, okay? So the corpus cavernosum, okay, it's located on the dorsal aspect of the penis, okay? So you have one on the left side, you have one on the right side, respectively, okay? And then you have one on the ventral side. This is called the corpus spongiosum. The way I remember which one is which is the spongiosum has the S in it, and the urethra goes straight through the spongiosum. So they share that same letter because the urethra goes straight through it. As you can see right here, kind of threads its way all the way through. You can also see it here. You can see that, excuse me, you can see the urethra inside of that corpus spongiosum right here because it goes straight through it. Okay? And what these muscles are responsible for is when the blood flow increases, when you're getting an erection, these muscles are the ones that are responsible for stiffening up in preparation for intercourse. Okay? So that's what you got to know about these, okay? So down here, so nothing in the Anatomy Atlas app for this one, okay? So what this is just trying to show you is that if we're taking a cross-section of the seminiferous tubules, okay, remember those worm-like structures inside the testes that produce all the sperm? what we're looking at here is you're seeing two of the cells. So the interstitial endocrine cells and the nurse cells, okay? Remember, interstitial produce the sperm. The nurse cell are responsible for the maturation of the sperm and for caring for them as they develop. We don't need to know anything here for lab for the purpose of meiosis. Maybe for lecture you do, but all that we're trying to show you here is the size of the nurse cells, what they look like, and how the interstitial endocrine cells look as well, all right? Okay. And then we have our male sperm here. So we have the acrosome. Remember I said it's the most northern tip of the sperm that actually has the enzyme for fertilization. The head contains all the DNA. The mid piece, and if we zoom in here, you can actually make out those powerhouses of the cells. You can make out those mitochondria there, if you remember what those guys look like from biology. All right. And then the tail, all right, which kind of wiggles back and forth to allow the sperm to propel themselves forward, okay? So we'll skip over the identification page here because that's all stuff you guys should have done. And then we have a couple things here, okay? So the path of sperm travel, all right, as it's making its way through the reproductive system. So sperm is always going to start somewhere near the testicles. But in this case, it gives us seminiferous tubules, which is the true origin for the sperm, okay? Because remember, this is where sperm originates, okay? So this is going to be our number one. Then what's going to go to after this? Well, after this, guys, it's going to go and do its short storage and maturation in the epididymis, okay? And then in preparation for the sperm exiting, it will then move through the ductus deferens, and then it will become the ejaculatory tract as it moves through the prostate, and then it will exit the body through the urethra. So we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just in reverse, so going upwards, all right? So I guarantee we'll probably see some question related to this, right? You know, how does sperm travel through the male reproductive system? Great example right there, okay? All right, and then we have our male reproductive physiology here, okay? So this is just kind of a fill in the blank, all right? So we'll start with the first one. The production of sperm, guys, thinking back to our pre-lab prep, is called the spermatogenesis, all right? Which occurs in the blank, and this is going to be the seminiferous tubules. Seminiferous tubules of the testes. The sperm development requires testosterone, okay, produced by the blank cells of the testes. So this is going to be the interstitial endocrine. All right, I'll just flip those letters. And then these cells surround the blank cells, which are the nurse cells, okay, which protect the sperm as they grow by creating a blood-testes barrier that prevents chemicals and immune cells in the blood from destroying them, which is obviously really, really important. We don't want that happening. These cells also nourish sperm as they develop by supplying them with nutrients and growth factors and by removing waste. After sperm are produced, they must spend at least 20 days in the blank to mature, okay? This is relating to the epididymis, okay, that short-term storage. So epididymis. After maturation, they can be stored for several weeks in the blank, and this is going to be the vas deferens here. Mature sperm have a blank that contains DNA, which is a head. The thin cap on the top of the head, remember the most northern tip, is called the acrosome. All right, and then once inside the female, the blank begins to move to propel the sperm, which is the tail. The energy for movement is supplied by the mitochondria in the body, or the mid-piece, I should say. All right, mid-piece. There we go. Of the sperm, which convert the fructose and citrate from semen into ATP. Since sperm must be kept at 35 degrees Celsius, also known as 95 degrees Fahrenheit, the testes are held outside the pelvic cavity. That was weird around when that popped up. The testes are held outside the pelvic cavity by a pouch of skin, muscle, and connective tissue called the scrotum. The scrotum has several features that keep the testes at 35 degrees. So what are the different kinds of muscles here? So this is the dartos, and then we also have the cremaster. All right. So when they're cold, these muscles contract to bring the testes closer to the body and relax when warm to move the testes further from the body. Of these two muscles, contraction of the blank also decreases the surface area of the scrotum to decrease heat loss when cold. And this is going to be the dartos muscle, okay? All right, in addition, a network of veins called the piniform plexus. I spelled that wrong. There we go. Cools the arterial blood going to the testes to keep them at 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. During the excitement phase of the male sexual response, increased blood flow to the penis causes erection. All right. This makes entry into the vagina possible during intercourse. The blank also contract during excitement phase to neutralize the acidity of the male urethra. So this is going to be what, guys? This is going to be the bulbourethral glands. All right. So perfect. So they neutralize the urine in there. Ejaculation happens in 2 stages. The first stage of ejaculation, okay, is called what, guys? This is called emission. Okay. The movement of sperm from the ductus deferens into the urethra. Semen is generated during this stage by the contraction of the prostate. So we'll get that one there. Which contributes about 30% of the volume of semen and several important components, including a clotting enzyme, a serine protease, and citrate. The contraction of the blank, okay, this is the seminal vesicle, which contributes 65% of the volume of semen, including a protein called proseminoglin. God, I'm sorry, I don't know how to name that one, guys. Whatever it is. Prostaglandins, calcium, fructose, and citrate. The second stage of ejaculation is the actual expulsion of it, okay? When semen is expelled from the body. All right. Perfect. Okay, guys. So that's all the male reproductive physiology, okay? But also, we went over, talked about some of these pictures over here, okay? I wanted you guys to see everything that I showed you. So I showed you guys the ducts, showed you guys the seminal vesicles, I showed you the prostate glands here, which, by the way, we wanted to actually look at these in more depth. This is the prostate here. As I said, the seminal vesicle is on the back side. Vas deferens here. Oops. Ejaculatory duct right here as it makes its way, of course, into the urethra. Okay. And then, of course, we have our tiny, tiny, tiny bulbourethral glands right here. Okay. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, hey, that's it for the male. Okay. And next, we're going to move on to the female. And then we will go from there. Okay, guys. I will see you back in a second.